So welcome everyone to the JB Media Institute Digital Drop-In. I'm so excited to have you here. My name is Sarah Benoit. I'm the co-founder and lead instructor of the JB Media Institute, and I've spent the last, I just celebrated my 19th year in business. And so I spent the last 19 years really focused on social media, search engine optimization, web design and development, and everything that kind of surrounds that. So blogging and advertising and email marketing and things like that. And today I'm so excited to have with me my friend Laura Lee Gaines. I should have checked on that
Darns.
too. Thank you. And Laura Lee and I met through Freelance Business Week officially. We had actually, kind of been aware of each other before, of each other's businesses, but we met officially at Freelance Business Week and had some great conversations about marketing and helping clients. And I immediately just felt like a kindred spirit. I felt like I'm so excited to have you here to share your ideas. I feel like the work you're doing is pretty awesome. So I want to just give Laura Lee a minute to introduce herself, tell you a little bit about her business. Then we're going to dive into this topic around marketing budgets.
Thank you, Sarah. It's an honor to be here with you. I feel equally the same about how we met and the synergy. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I am a digital marketer. I work with small business owners, mainly service-based businesses. I do work with some nonprofits, and I do work in the similar industry doing the same services that Sarah has just mentioned. We do web design, search engine optimization, social media management. One of the biggest things that we do is work on marketing planning and strategies and budgets. So I'm going to enjoy today's topic and appreciate you having me here with you. And hopefully we'll have a great conversation with everyone here.
Awesome, thanks. So yeah, this topic was one I was really excited, Laura Lee, that you wanted to talk about this because I've actually never done a digital drop-in on this topic. There's just usually so many other things people want to talk about. It feels like marketing budgeting is kind of basic in some ways, but it's so key. It's like the cornerstone of literally everything, especially because for me, I am working, I consult with a lot of different clients, and I've been working with different clients on different things around their advertising and their organic success. And what I'm finding is that the budget issue, it can make or break what you're working on, right? So literally this morning I'm talking to a client about the fact that they need to cut their budget down. They've had somebody else running their marketing and it's not really working out for them the way they hoped, and so we're having to revisit all of that. So even though I think, at least for me as a business owner, I can admit sometimes I want to avoid the financial conversations. I'm like, I have too much to do. I don't have time for this. But at the end of the day, especially as we go into the last quarter of the year, I think this conversation is so, so valuable. And it's about, trying to make this something that's digestible, especially for small businesses. Because again, I think when you're wearing all the hats and you just have so many different things on your plate, it's like, where do you get that time to really sit down and strategize it and think it through? So hopefully today, at least before we get into the Q&A, I just want to talk a little bit about the anatomy of marketing budgets and some of the considerations you have to put into it. And I think, again, going into the last quarter, looking at the first quarter of 2023, it is a really good time for a lot of us to really kind of consider like what worked and what didn't. Where do we spend money? And keeping in mind, as small business owners, your time is money. Your energy is money. So I always like to remind every business owner that, yes, it matters what the marketing dollars are, but also, it matters that if you're spending hours and hours DIYing something, if you're spending hours and hours doing research on something, there's a value to that. And so I'm always reminding, especially my smaller clients, like, hey, don't forget to value your own time, because there is a cost to that, right? As far as our own lives and our own vibrancy, there's a cost when we're expending a lot of time and energy, not just money. So your time and your money are valuable. There's a cost to pretty much anything in marketing, I feel, even when it's not, like I said, a dollar financial number. And so you have to be the one who can say, like, this is what my time is worth. This is where my time is best spent. Yeah, and Ashley, I see your positive response to this. Yeah, it's really important because sometimes I think, we forget that this really does matter, right? So if I'm working my own hours, doing my own marketing, I'm going to start to put a value on that. So I know how much that costs, right? Like if I was going to hire somebody to do that work for 6 hours, how much does that cost me? Because I should be making at least that much, right, off of that work. And so I want to have that in mind as part of my budgeting. Also, I think we have to sort of get away from marketing being a cost, marketing being an expense. I just want to say language matters, right? And when you think about something as a cost or an expense or a tax on you, it's creating a vibe. And so I really work super hard when I'm spending money on my marketing to really reinforce the mindset that this is an investment, right? And not only is it an investment, but it's directly an investment in my relationships. So how much are my relationships with my customers worth? I have to be showing up and putting energy into them, right? No relationships work well if one half of the relationship isn't putting any energy into it. And so really just reframing this, I think sometimes makes budget conversations easier and helps you, work on your own mindset around money. And also it's important, I think, just to remember investments, you don't always get a return immediately. So there should be a little bit of time that goes by before you see the results or you see the traction or you see some sort of ROI, right? Like we say in business. And so play that long game. Think about that. Also, I know you all already know this, but as somebody who's working in technology every day, um, you know, data tracking and analysis, again, I know another thing that we all don't have time for is any more data and learning more data and talking about more data. But I think if you're working in the marketing field, you realize pretty quickly this is essential. I literally just said to somebody in my class this morning, she basically was, asking me, how do I know when a marketing person is telling me what to do or there's a trend, how do I know that it's the right thing and that I should follow it? And I was like, well, you have to look at your own audiences and see what they want and need. Just because some other company is doing something doesn't mean that your audience is going to want that. And so we have to look at our own data to see what our own audiences want because they're actually unique to us. And our relationship as a brand or a business or an organization with them is unique, right? It's a certain type of relationship. So to me, anytime that we're looking at where we should be spending the marketing dollars, my first question is going to be, well, where are we already getting results? Which audiences are already buying this? Which platforms are already producing things that we know are really important for us and we can see that it's growing, right? Because we want to take the budget and actually reroute it towards those things over time. So that we're not just kind of throwing money at a bunch of different platforms all the time, but we're actually spending money and learning from that spend and then reevaluating periodically in the mix. And this is where, the world of digital marketing has completely changed how we approach this stuff because of the level of specificity that we can have in our tracking data currently and also in our ad systems and how we approach actually like reaching out to people and attracting the right people. And so to me, like I said, if you've been in business for a while, you should have some knowledge to draw off of, even if it's very basic data. There is something you can learn from it for sure about what content is working, what kind of results are really happening, where you're seeing growth versus where maybe you're seeing some stagnation. All of that is going to be really, really important. And, if you're in a startup mode, there's other things that we have to think about. That's where we might look at what other companies are doing, what competition is doing, where are other similar businesses having wins. But then as soon as we're actually doing the marketing and we're spending the budget, we're actually going to start learning directly from that, right? So this is where I feel like digital marketing just opens up this space where we learn as we go. I know it's easier to spend money when you're like, I know what's going to happen and I know it's worth it, so I'm going to spend this money or I'm going to invest my time. But the truth is, in the digital world, sometimes you really don't know till you're there. And so like you have to kind of have that mind frame to be okay with that, right? And then don't forget that, marketing is a part of the overall operating budget of your company, right? So a lot of times I think, and this goes back to how do you feel about marketing, right? Love it, hate it, little bit of both. A lot of us have a love-hate relationship with marketing. And so I think sometimes we want to put it over here, like in the corner. Like, I don't really want to deal with this. But we really want to see it as an integral part of the whole company itself, right? And we're going to talk more about that with some of Laura Lee's suggestions about how to put your budget together. But I just think that's a really valuable piece to look at, right? It's like your company, you're spending money on all sorts of things. And so really understanding like, where does the marketing budget fall in comparison to those things? Sometimes I'm talking to people and they feel like I'm suggesting this huge budget. And then I'm like, yeah, but in the rest of the business, you're spending this, and this, which is like an insane amount of money on these things. And so really by comparison, your marketing budget is pretty tight, right? It's actually not that much if we look at it. And actually right now, we want to maximize that. And so a lot of times we have to have that bigger picture perspective just to help us stay kind of on track. Line items for marketing budgets. Again, this can go, I feel, this is like a rabbit hole we can all go down because most of us are doing this vast, like huge amount of different marketing things, right? We've got multiple social media channels. We're running a website. We've got maybe some printed materials we're doing. Maybe we have a physical location with signage and things like that. And then that doesn't even go into that all marketing, as I know Laura Lee does very similar work to me sometimes. It requires research. It requires setting up systems, maybe even purchasing some software. It requires buying your domain names and having, like all these kind of administrative behind the scenes things that are just as much a part of marketing as the forward facing things that we see, right? And so we want to make sure that we have a budget that's going to cover all the phases of marketing, from research to actually designing and creating content to actually distributing and disseminating, advertising that content, right? And with marketing, I feel like, especially in the digital world, it's really key that we understand what I said, which is we are flexing, like we're learning as we go. And so there's got to be some room for experimentation, right? So HubSpot has a great kind of breakdown of how 70% of the time you should be hopefully spending money on things that are going to work in some way. But to me, 30% of the time we're looking to grow and we're looking to just test out new markets and things like that. And so it's really important to kind of understand, you want to have a little bit of budget set aside for what I call fun, right? And just seeing what works or trying a different kind of style of content or something like that. And Ashley, I see your comment. Budgeting research is really difficult, absolutely. And that's because businesses are so different across the board, right? Like what a larger company is going to do is very different than what a micro enterprise is going to do. So a lot of times when you look at market research or you look at industry research and generalized stuff, it's pretty difficult. And just so you all know, I see those Q&A questions coming in. We're going to get to those for sure. So just the last few points, make sure the marketing budget supports the customer journey. So again, spending money at certain places where people are making decisions or certain points in their journey of getting to know your brand is really important. So building brand awareness, as well as doing different things to convert people into customers, as well as doing different things to educate people about why they should choose you or something about your products or services that make you unique. You spend money in all these different parts of their experience. And that's where you kind of, if you can understand the journey better, you're better at spending the budget in the right places. Right. And then also having really specific goals. So if you took nothing away from today, it would be the message that successful marketing is a lot about specificity and relevancy. So being broad and just throwing money at everything with generic messaging, in my opinion, is almost like the guaranteed way to spend money for no reason. And so really get that campaign mindset together, right? Who do you want to attract? Why are they going to say yes? And how are you going to reach them specifically with messages that are super important and valuable to them? So again, if we're talking about the bigger picture, right? I think there's some questions we can start, and this is where I want Laura Lee to join me and kind of talk a little bit about this. But with small to medium-sized businesses that have less manpower and resources, can you talk a little bit about how you're helping your smaller business clients estimate what their market budget should be? And are you helping them look at like a year, 3 years, 1 quarter? What do you feel like the best approach is in kind of just getting started with this conversation?
Well, what we try to encourage our clients to do is to create that roadmap that you are speaking about, because before a marketing budget can actually be established, you need to know where you're going. So this is where our marketing planning and strategies come in, and we feel like are very, very important, because if you don't really know your strengths, weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats, and you're not looking at competitive analysis and digging deep into the weeds and creating a blueprint, you're just throwing your money away. And the estimated budgets really depend on your desired outcome and the results that you're expecting to receive from that marketing plan. So we highly encourage that you start with a marketing plan. And so each of those activities also come with associated costs. So it's important, like, to start with an overall budget, let's say 5% of your gross revenue. We're just arbitrarily throwing that number out there. So then you would have to look at options, or do you have some in-house options that would help you save and streamline some of your budget resources that you want to use in determining, the goals and objectives you have for your business. So, is it better to have an in-house marketing team, or is it better to outsource those services? Those are types of questions that need to be asked in a budget. And that marketing plan helps you evaluate that. So the ideal budget will give you the greatest coverage to include those most important activities that's going to increase the ROI. And then, when we look at whether to focus on a year-long budget or quarterly budget, ideally you want to focus on year-long, quarterly, even weekly and monthly budgets. However, though, it's going to be based on your company's complexity, and again, on its goals and objectives and the target audience you're trying to reach. And you'll hear us talk a lot about, marketers talk a lot about target audiences, because it's hugely important for the success of your marketing activities to place your message, your product, your services in front of that customer that's most interested in your company. So the quarterly budget will help you get more into the weeds on which activity might require more budgeting than, let's say, a different time of year. Let's say you're a seasonal business. So if you're a seasonal business, maybe you don't really want to place all your marketing dollars during the time that you're doing really, really well, naturally, organically, bringing traffic and business. You would just kind of shift those marketing dollars later in the year when things are a little slower. So it kind of helps you balance your budget throughout the year. So we like to have clients look at weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly budgets and try to evaluate where those marketing dollars best fit in. And whatever goal you set, it needs to be realistic. You need to be able to track it and evaluate it. And it needs to be over a given time frame and a period, so you can make comparisons for what's best for the growth of the business. And that really overall just helps you complete your long-term goals. I recently read research from Small Business Expo, and it actually came in this week. And it suggested that only 8.6% of businesses focus on yearly goals, and roughly 17% weekly, 25% on quarterly, and 25% on monthly. So it would be interesting with the group that we have with us today, kind of figuring out, where do you fit in with that? Are you looking at your yearly, quarterly, monthly, or weekly?
Yeah, and feel free to pop that in the chat if you've already done a budget before and and maybe you're addressing multiple aspects of that, right? Because definitely some of us, I think, we have a bigger vision of the full year and where we want to be, but then each month we're running campaigns and we need to see results from those campaigns. And so we want to be able to say, like, okay, here's what the bigger budget looks like and what those long-term goals are. But then as I'm executing the marketing every week or every month, a lot of times I don't want to wait 6 months to figure out it's not working.
Right.
I want to
Yeah, and especially where we live, we have a lot of seasonal based type clients, like, landscapers, for example, asphalt paving companies, tree companies. And so, it doesn't make sense to push your marketing budget, in the spring or the summer, if you're already overwhelmed and turning down jobs anyways, it's better off to shift those dollars, maybe in the winter months, and come up with different services that could be offered to help them balance the business through the year.
Yeah. And Trisha, I see the questions in here. I have a clarifying question for you. When you say what are some of the high priority items to put at the top of this list in your experience, when you say at the top of the list, do you mean at the top of the marketing budget? Could you just clarify that for me? And then Ashley has a question about tips on how to budget for research. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I know you do, and I work alongside of JV Media Group Agency. I know research is actually a requirement of every client they take in. So when they start a project, the first month is literally research so that they can then execute a marketing strategy. So can you talk a little bit about how you're doing that similar thing, or how do you help clients understand, like, what is the amount of time they need? What is the cost potentially of that research, like competition research and things like that?
Right. So we look at the overall budget of what a company actually can afford, right? At the end of the day, a budget is a budget. And so we explain to our clients based on which services we provide them. We kind of embed that research cost into the packages that we offer them, and we let them know up front that part of that is research. And so research is interesting because you can go down rabbit holes and it seems like a waste of money. And so you come back to the client and you're like, hey, this is what this research led us to. And it ends up opening up a lot of other questions. And so then there's more research, right? The research never stops. And so that's why we try to include in the budget research with the products and services we offer. So a tip on how to handle that, I guess that you would look at your overall budget, what you have to spend, right, for all your marketing activities, and then decide on a percentage of what you're willing to spend for research. Sometimes research is as important as the activities themselves. So again, it depends on the size of the company, the goals that company has, and the size of the reach, right? Your audience might be across the entire United States, or it might be right here in Western North Carolina. So again, just really evaluating what is available in your budget to allocate to research and being true to that number.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll throw out, just because Ashley was commenting on the nonprofit world, I will just say too that, it's interesting. One of the things that I've worked with nonprofits on is actually going to their board meetings and helping the whole board, as well as the staff of the nonprofit, look at data so that we can really start to understand, like, where do we need to know more, which is the research part, and what have we already learned so that we can be making good marketing decisions. And so, yeah, and I see that great answer there too about letting people, letting the nonprofit decision makers know, like, what questions are you researching, and making sure those answers come back in a sort of formalized way so they see the results. But one of the things I think has been really helpful for nonprofits is to introduce the data conversation as part of how the board and the staff interact. I actually worked with United Way probably 15 years ago, and I taught their whole staff how to look at the Google Analytics and go into and really advocate for themselves in the board meetings about why they needed more of a budget for social media, because it was working and they could show that, right? They could start to show an actual tangible thing that was getting accomplished. And when they could do that, the board understood it more. Like, all of a sudden, it wasn't just paying for Facebook, right? It was actually like creating this end result, which they all agreed was something they wanted. So I love using data just to highlight the conversation. And make it more of like a goals conversation, and like to get everybody united around how we want to achieve the same goal. Trisha, thanks for clarifying a little bit on Trisha's question was, what are some of the high priority items that go at the top of a marketing budget list in our experience? I want to just throw out before you answer, Laura Lee, that for me, it's interesting because I start marketing budgets at first with some core things that from a marketing standpoint, like, I think are just important. And I want to evaluate with the company at first, like, so with customer service and customer relations, how are we spending money there? What does that look like? Because I think that's part of marketing, right? And we have to be able to do that. We have to be able to service our customers because they're more likely to buy again and tell other people. And then I kind of break things down again into this sort of like phasing where I'm looking at like what do we know about our marketing right now? What are the unanswered questions? What do we have to dig deeper on, get more information on, do this research phase on? A lot of times I'm going to look at what are the new markets that we want to open. So how are we handling our existing people? But then the new people we want to attract, who are they? And how are we going to get there? What do we think? Are we gaining traction anywhere already? Right. And then I often look at what I call partnership marketing, which is an extra bucket that I don't think everybody always has in their marketing budget. But I always want to look at our actual connections and where do we already have partners that could tell a bunch of people about what we're doing and it could automatically build trust and drive some customers to us because I'm a really big believer in that type of marketing. I think influencer marketing falls under that. I think really PR in some ways falls under that because even though public relations is its own thing, it's so about relationships, it's so about who you know. And so I always want to look there because I think partnerships are often low hanging fruit where you might be able to spend less and collaborate with another brand or another person and really get more reach than you'll be getting by yourself in some ways. And so I start with just those. But what about you, Laura Lee? Like when you're just thinking about that first meeting with a client and talking about, you know, how you're going to break the budget down, what are kind of those top priority places that you start the conversation?
We really start with the marketing planning and strategy piece of it because a lot of people come in and they don't have a budget, they don't have a plan, and they've never even thought about those type of questions. So we start digging in to, well, do you know who your ideal client is? Who is that perfect client that you want to walk through your door? And they don't really know. And so we try to really drill down into the market that they're in and in their industry and look at the market segmentation and actually place their clients in these buckets, if you will. What type of clients do you have? What type of clients do you want to attract? And, who is that ideal client and how are you going to reach that audience? And where are those people? What do they look like? Where do they live? What do they read? Who do they hang out with? Where are they at on social media? And we'll get into this later on, but a lot of people come in thinking they need everything. And so for us, it's a real high priority to really get a grasp around what digital marketing is and what it is not. And really understanding that advertising and marketing are two different things. And so getting them to understand that they need to streamline those marketing dollars and the activities that's actually going to help grow their business and actually satisfy them and, really support the mission and the vision of their company, which is the very reason they created the company to begin with. And so we really try to focus on getting them in front of the right audience. So for me, the top priority item would be knowing who your customers are and knowing who you are as a company.
Yeah, and I would say too, one of the interesting things that you just pointed out made me think of a recent sort of conundrum that I had a consulting client in where, essentially that difference between marketing and advertising. So they started spending advertising dollars with a marketing company, right? And buying all these ads. But as soon as they hired me and I got in there, I was like, okay, so there's like 68% of the people that are getting to this point in the cart and we're losing them. So immediately I was like, something's wrong. Like, why would we lose that many people? They've actually gotten to the point where they put items in the cart. They just didn't check out. And I went through and tested everything, but that was one of the conversations we had to have with their whole sort of marketing team, right? Which is, it was great that we were ready to run these great ads, but you didn't think about the website functionality and nobody tested it first and nobody made sure that it was really easy. So what we did was have successful ad campaigns that drove people to the products, got them to put the products in the cart, but then there was some clunkiness around finishing this like final steps. And so because nobody was looking at that marketing piece, right, which is the website usability, we had advertising dollars being spent that worked, but didn't work all the way towards actually making money off the campaign. And so we had to immediately kind of reevaluate and be like, okay, the advertising started before you all did this sort of marketing piece of making sure, right, that everything in the marketing world is set up correctly for the advertising campaigns to actually be super successful. I just feel like that's a common thing that I see, where we skipped over the part of website usability and how important that is. We went straight to buying ads. And I'm like, yeah, but we have to make sure that flow, that you get the results that you wanted off of those ad spends.
Yeah, we have we have a saying, you know, we analyze before we strategize. So, you know, instead of just throwing it on the wall, hoping it's going to stick, because it's not going to. So,
Yeah. So the next two questions I wanted you to talk about are, you know, when you're working with businesses, how do you help them decide where they need to put their money, right? Once you've done that research phase. And what is your perspective on the idea that brands have to spend money on every channel? You know, there's a lot of advocacy for people being on every single social media platform or every single thing. And I'm curious, from your perspective, how are you helping people really prioritize, or not? How are you helping them split it up?
well, we try to teach our clients that they need to zero in on their target audience, which I've already said earlier. And we do that with market segmentation, just breaking down the market and figuring out who the clients are and what they want and what the needs are. And you know, looking at the objectives and are there any gaps, and, you know, really trying to get a product and service in front of the right people that actually have an interest in the product. And we set SMART goals. So it's something, if you're not familiar with that, you can look it up. But we look at, you know, whether it's specific, measurable, relevant, and timely. And so when you look at those goals and you match them to a target audience, you're within scope of what you're trying to achieve. And so, you know, most of us have a mission and a value for our company, where we want to be in the world, and which customers we want to attract. So that's where we need to put our focus is on activities that will put us in front of those people that are most interested in our products. So it basically has to make sense with a specific message to the right audience. And that's where we tell people to put their money, is in front of the right audience. And that goes to this question as to whether you should be on every channel, and spreading your marketing dollars across all channels. Absolutely not. We preach this all the time. We recommend that our clients find a channel where their target audience actually reside. And you want to build relationships with your target audience and put the message in front of the right people. And that doesn't mean you have to be on every single social media channel. For a company, we personally don't support TikTok. I know that in my industry that TikTok and Reels and different types of videography is needed to make those products succeed. And I'm not the best person for that. So for my own company, I'm not offering that. But you know, I have these same conversations with myself. So, I am not on every channel. You will not find me on every channel. You will, however, find a profile for my business on every channel, that pushes people to the other channels that I'm most interested in. And the reason for that actually helps you with the search engines, to have a healthy backlink. And some of those channels like YouTube and TikTok and LinkedIn, which LinkedIn everyone should have, in my opinion, but those different types of channels send really strong signals to Google that you're legitimate. So it's okay to have a channel and every profile on every channel if you wish for a free backlink, but you don't have to manage them or push your marketing dollars into those channels. So you don't have to be an expert on every channel. You just have to be an expert on the channel where your customers actually reside.
Yeah, I'll say one of my greatest testimonials at a conference I was at was from a student who said the best thing that happened to her in my classes was that I told her she didn't have to use Twitter, because she hated Twitter and she didn't want to use it anymore. And so she was like, thank you for giving me permission to tell my marketing director that I don't want to do Twitter anymore, that we're not getting results there anyway. And I said, no, just put the final tweet at the top, says, come visit us on Facebook and Instagram, right? And it allowed her to take all of her work as sort of the marketing coordinator who is strategizing and buying ads, and just focus it onto the channels that were doing really well. And also to free up her time, right? So she was at the time sort of a person marketing team with like a support person running the website and doing some graphics. But it was like for her, there was just no way for every channel to be succeeding and producing results when there's only her managing them all. And so I was like, we have to just be realistic. It's fine if you're on Twitter. We'll let them know that we're not going to post there very much. Make sure if there's messages, you don't leave people hanging. But outside of that, you can focus your budget and your energy on the thing that's actually really working and producing results. So that goes to the last question, is like when you see something not working for the clients, you know, that's where, I don't know about you, but I really try to talk to clients when we're doing budget work. Hey, we have to be honest. We just have to be honest and straightforward so that we don't waste any money. Like if something's not working, that's not a failure. It's just that's not where our audience is. That's not where we're gaining traction. So let's take the budget and really look at where we have that traction. Is that sort of a similar conversation for you all?
It is. And, you know, in general, if we've done our homework and research well, it normally works, right? But there's always gaps. There's always things that don't work. So we revisit often those gaps and we try to close the gaps, and it's crucial. So, you know, a good example would be, let's say that you want to promote beer hops, and you are promoting that in you're promoting that in a neighborhood, let's say, that doesn't support beer hops, right? So you're constantly pushing these ads in front of people that are going to bring negativity to your campaign and possibly hurt the brand more so than help it, right? So you identify that issue, that problem, and you just make adjustments and changes. And we do that often, right? When we're marketing and we're pushing out these ads and advertisements, we get trolls. And when you're seeing a lot of that activity and a lot of negativity, it's a good idea to go back and revisit your target audience, because you're probably missing the mark. And there might be some kind of gap in your own services that you're offering. You know, maybe there's a brand identity problem that needs to be addressed. For example, my own company is called Social Media Buzz, but it's probably the least thing that I do. So there's a big brand gap, and I know that, right? So even as 10 years in the industry, we are going to have to rebrand our own company, right? So there can be a problem with your own business and how you are presenting it and sending out your messages. And maybe I'm in front of the right audience, right? But I'm not presenting the desired service that they are needing. And so they may say, well, I know that you're social media, WNC Social Media Buzz, but I need a website, but I didn't know you did websites, so I went to another company, right? So they were my target audience, but there was a gap in my branding and in my presentation of my products and services and so forth. So that's just a good example. I mean, it happens to the best of us. And so that's when we come back to the marketing plan and the strategies and look at our blueprint and say, where are these gaps? What's working well and what's not working? And it all comes down to looking at your metrics and your outcome and dealing with facts. And sometimes we don't like what we see. So you just make changes. There's no perfect system out there with digital marketing, as you know. It's a great unknown. It feels like a black hole sometimes. So
Well, and I'll just say, I love what you're saying, because I think it comes back around to something I teach a lot, which I call the campaign mindset, right? Which means if we can look at specific audiences, set specific goals, create a strategy for reaching those people and getting them to do what we want them to do, we start to be able to see in the data and in the process where we're losing people. So is it that we're in the wrong place? Because the data would show us one thing if that's the case. Or is it that the message that we put out didn't quite land where we wanted it to land? And that's just the value, I think, of having like a campaign process where you put things together like that. And then you look at like, how far did we get and where did it not work? Rather than, oh, this just didn't work. Boo. Facebook sucks. Like I've definitely had people there, that's the conclusion they drew. And I was like, wait a second, that's a little broad. Let's really look at where we lost people, because maybe it isn't that we didn't get in front of the right people. It's that the messaging that we put out didn't work, or the call to action didn't click in. This is also why I'm a big fan in any advertising that people do, that you have multiple ad groups with multiple ads, that you don't just run one ad. So many of my clients come to me, they're running one ad. And I'm like, no, no, no. Like, it's free to, like, for the same budget, you can run all these ads, and Google and Facebook and TikTok and all these different systems, they'll figure out which one everybody likes, and then they'll rise that ad to the top, and you'll get better results, right? Like, that's how the systems are built. So we want to be open to that. As we're wrapping up, I want to remind everybody, if there's any questions, pop them in the Q&A. But one of the things that came out of my conversations before today's call was basically social media. And a lot of people struggle with social media budgeting and how that fits in. And I just wanted to hear from you quickly, Laura-Lee, a little bit about what are the average kind of costs that you're seeing with your company. As you pointed out earlier, every business is different, and you really have to evaluate what kind of real budget you have based on your total income, right? And so you're looking at that as a core, but then as you're breaking down where you're getting results, and you're starting to choose where you're going to need, let's say, social media support, like with your company, what is the average cost for somebody who's hiring you to do organic social media, or other people, or advertising budgets on social media? Where are those falling just in general?
As you stated, the average support cost is determined by the industry, the size of their audience, the percent of gross revenue. There's all types of formulas out there to come up with an exact answer. But I have an example. So, let's say gross revenues are roughly $500,000, and your marketing budget is 5% of the gross, and so you're going to spend $25,000 yearly on this budget for all your marketing activities. So it's just a little over $2,000 a month, right, for all the marketing activities. So can't say it enough. You really need to streamline those activities and figure out what's working and what's not. And so when the budget gets spread out across all these marketing activities, you can say, you'll realize soon there's very little for social media ads and Google ads and website maintenance and content marketing and all these different activities you need. So it's real important to figure out which ones you do need. And so let's say, you're looking at $1,000 a month on your social media based off of the 50% or the 5% of your gross receipts, and then 50% of it would be used for social media. So $1,000 a month, right? And so $1,000 a month isn't very much if you need to hire someone to manage that platform for you, manage the ads for you, and have an ad budget. So it becomes very complex. So for us, what we are seeing in general, when we work with companies, we charge anywhere from $750 a month all the way to $5,000 a month to manage some of these platforms. So for social media management, it could be anywhere from $750 a month to $2,500 a month. And on top of that, they would need an ad budget as well. So a lot of small businesses struggle with that. So we suggest that companies first use their in-house folks first. And so when we're talking about organic reach in social media, in order for it truly to be organic, it needs to come from an organic source. And so having a company try to create organic material for you can be very costly. And so we first ask people to look in-house. Who do you have in-house that can come in for training and learn how to manage their social media platforms? And so that helps them save some on the marketing dollars or the management dollars, and then they can use the rest for the ads. And so it's sometimes not feasible, right, for everybody to support both. And so organic social media today is almost non-existent unless you're just like in a food industry, highly sought after service, or you're just this instant sensation. And we do have companies like that do really well organically, but it takes a lot of effort in-house for that to occur. So What we are seeing is it's pay to play to reach. So,
Yeah.
and even when you're paying to play, if we don't have organic material to work with, you can fall flat on your face. So, but to answer your question specifically, the average cost from what we're seeing is anywhere from $750 a month to $2,500 a month just to manage it, and help you create that content. But we really rely on the business owners to help us and their in-house folks to help us build that true organic message that needs to go out.
Yeah, I love that. I just want to say that I really agree with all of that. Like, I'm seeing that really the very lowest for some of my small businesses that we can do anything organic. Like the very lowest is maybe 800 a month. And that's if you get somebody that I think is freelancing and maybe a little bit newer to the industry.
Yes.
And you're still going to have to give them a lot of direction, and the content, a lot of times, especially if you have a physical location, it's going to be really important that you have somebody on site in your team that is in-house. Even if they don't do all the social media themselves, they have to be like the social media liaison. And they have to be involved in the content in some way, whether it's the business owner or a marketing coordinator or somebody working the floor. I just really agree with all of that. And I think, especially with smaller budgets that are maybe around the $1,000 a month mark, it's really just important to realize, like, you might only be able to spend that on 1 or 2 platforms at most. That's
Yes.
not going to get you somebody who can handle 5 or 6 different platforms at once. So I think there's a lot of realities in the social media world that we're starting to kind of like try to talk out, because I know a lot of social media managers that I know have really struggled in the world of pricing, because there seems to be some confusion about
Yes.
what the cost of somebody doing your social media is, the difference between advertising and organic social media support. And so really understanding those things. So I know we're coming up at the top of the hour. We've got a couple questions I just wanted to throw out because I think they're great, and we'll answer them real quick. Caitlin, thanks so much for this one. Is there anything that y'all often find is overlooked or forgotten in marketing budgets?
Yes. I would say website maintenance is hugely overlooked. And people think, well, I have a website, it's in WordPress, I can just leave it and it'll run on its own. And then, when that website gets hacked and the website's, taken down, it's going to cost them triple the cost to get it back and possibly a total rewrite. So for us, we see that a lot, that website maintenance is overlooked. Not the cost to build the website, but the cost to keep up with the fresh content too, whether they need a blogging platform or they don't, changing out the services and the offerings and not just being static all the time, and just freshening up that content, which the search engines expect to see. So for me, when I'm looking at people's budgets, they have no concept of website maintenance. That to me is the biggest item overlooked that I see on a continual basis.
Yeah, I love that we have the same answer. That's, as a web designer and developer, that's the number one thing. People have this idea that their website is a cost that they pay for, and then they only have a tiny cost after that. And it's like, really, in the world of website usability and of just algorithmic technology and machine learning and customer behaviors changing all the time, the truth is, like, I feel like your website should be evaluated for usability minimally like once a year. You should be testing things like every quarter to make sure there's no problems in the conversions and the actions you want people to take. And a lot of times people just don't have that written in their budget. So there's no money for, like my team to be doing that maintenance. But it means that you end up in a more reactionary state rather than a proactive state with your website, which I think can be really frustrating. And then Bev, I see your question. What do you budget for boosts then on top of the $750 for platform management? So what is the social media budget per month if an internal person is posting? So I just want to say, and again, you can throw in Laura Lee on your perspective here. So for me, when we're looking at like a $800 to $1,000 budget for platform management, A lot of times I feel like that's probably a more outsourced number than an in-house number. I think if you have somebody in-house that's doing your social media, the biggest thing you have to worry about is that you let them have time in their actual job to do the social media. So most of the time what I see is they assign social media duties to a person on the team that is already working 40 hours a week. So like if their workflow is full at 40 hours a week and you're now telling them they have to manage Facebook and Instagram and run ads there, where are they getting that time? And so to me, that's where in-house is just a little bit of a different consideration, right? Because you might be paying that person already, you've got their salary in your budget, but it's like, what time frames are you going to give them to actually do the work? Because probably something else might have to get removed. So like a lot of times I've worked with companies, they decide somebody on their team is going to do social media, but they never say to them, you now have 17 hours a week to work on social media. You now have 8 hours a week to work on social media. They just expect the person somehow to fit it in, which is definitely not going to work. And then I think from there with an in-house person, it's really looking at social media goals and deciding what kind of budget would you need to accomplish those goals. There may be some organic things you could do, like buy a Canva account, right? Or buy some systems that would make it easier for your in-house person to get everything done and streamline everything. You could put together a budget for boosting different posts. And that I think really is about the size of the company, like we talked about earlier, and what is available. Because I've seen nonprofits with very, very lean budgets. I've seen us use $100 for boosted posts and do really well because we knew who we were targeting and what we wanted to say and exactly what we needed them to do. So we maximized a small budget to create a lot more activity around something. Other companies were spending 3 or 4 grand on social media advertising, right? Because they have that and they've got a person in house that's kind of, already in the zone of like creating the content, publishing the content, running the ad campaigns. So I feel like, it kind of adjusts. But when you're in house, I think it's, really looking at the person that you want to assign it to and what kind of hours are you going to give them to do the work? And then what are you paying them? So like what part of their job is now a social media expense? And do you want to add to that, Laura Lee? Just thoughts on?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I think too, the person that you have do it in-house that you assign that task to, you need to get them into some training and make sure that they're the right fit for that role too. It takes a special person to really push out your message and trust that the right message is getting out and the right creatives are made. And so maybe they don't know how to use Canva. And so you send them to some training so that they have the right tools to work with, because making their job easier is also going to save you money. So usually our clients spend about, and this is outsourced to us, they spend about 25% to 50% over their management fee. So if someone's, and I said that wrong, of their budget. So if they have a marketing budget of, let's say, $2,000 a month for social media, but they know they're gonna have to spend $750 on the management, they would spend that remaining dollars on their ads, but their ads are usually 50% to 75% more than what they're spending on the management piece. And so it can get very expensive when you have to outsource it. So if you're spending a $750 a month for management, but you need another $1,000 to $1,500 in ads, it becomes very costly. So it might make more sense to bring it in-house and pay someone hourly. And some of my clients are leaning on the local colleges too to bring in internships and looking for even family members to help manage the social media where it doesn't cost them anything. So that's something else that you can look at. But the management piece is just as expensive as the ad piece of the marketing.
Yeah, and I'll say too that I do a lot of consulting with in-house staffing. So like I've actually helped a number of companies hire their first social media person. I've helped them train the people on their marketing team to incorporate different parts of social media into their jobs. And so, there is a big movement towards some of that, that I think is really, You can sometimes get better social media results when you have somebody in-house that's really integrally part of the storytelling, and things like that. So I know we're a little bit over. If there's any other questions, feel free to drop them right now. I'm glad to stay for an extra few minutes. The rest of this slide deck, as you all know, I always give you a little sort of ebook to dig into, and there's additional questions that you can be asking about your budget and your goals. And so the questions that we've been talking about today, I just want to invite you to use this as a guideline to start your own conversations. If you have a larger business, to have that conversation with the whole group. And, you know, again, down the road, we might talk about this topic again as well, because I feel like there is a deeper data conversation to have. Like I said, the next sort of conversation I feel that really matters is around what are we really trying to accomplish and what data shows us that we're doing it. As most of you know, Google Analytics is making a big change this year. And next year in July of 2023, Google Analytics will be a really different animal. So we have a little less than a year to really learn that stuff. You've also got a bunch of information from me just about our upcoming classes and events. We have a great educational event happening in November here in Asheville if you're interested. And then you have all my contact information. So feel free to reach out to me with any questions about the topic. But Laura Lee, thanks so much for joining us today. I am really just glad to have you here. And hopefully, again, like I said, in a few months, we can come back and talk a little bit more about this, maybe dig a little deeper into the data conversation as we prepare for the advent of GA4 officially, which is become the mad focus of my whole life lately.
Yes.
But yeah, thanks everyone so much for being here. Thanks Laura Lee for joining us and sharing your expertise. I will just share the poll results so you can all see. Like I said, a lot of us love-hate relationships with marketing. That's okay. That's where we're all sitting. So thanks for joining us, and I hope to see you at a future digital drop-in. Have a great day.
Thank you.